Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about generative AI and its role in software development. It's clear that generative AI has the capacity to completely reshape the software development process. To discuss that, I'm joined by someone who knows a lot about the topic. With me is Aju Mathew, Vice President, Software Engineering at Aspire. Aju, very good to have you with us today.
Nice meeting you here, James, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. So we hear so much about generative AI these days, so many headlines. What is your sense in terms of software development? What is the current role of generative AI?
Well, generative AI has been around for almost a year and a half to two. Now, in the area of software development, we've seen developers or testers having started to use generative AI as a coding assistant. Now, basically asking questions by using prompts into the chat interface that some of these Gen AI platforms provide and get answers from that, and which is used in some form in your software development activity. Now, this is a kind of a tactical usage of Gen AI where you're looking for a point solution. So here, Gen AI may, give a step-by-step approach to your problems and or even a snippet of the code or solution to address the problem. So that's how we see, how we see Gen AI in the current role for software development,
Mhm.
James.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, are companies adopting it rapidly, or are they still waiting to move forward with it?
Well, it's a mixed bag here. Some companies have subscribed to the Gen AI platforms, which also has a chat interface and deployed it in enterprise wide within their ecosystem and has given an interface to all of their employees with some do's and don'ts and guidelines for usage. Whereas others have not yet made a formal decision for an enterprise wide rollout and is kind of in a wait and watch mode or kind of doing POCs on these aspects actually. So it's a mixed bag, James.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I've seen that myself. Well, I think that a really big question is, how can generative AI play a leading role in software development? What about in terms of epics and user stories?
Well, from a leading role of generative AI in software development, we need to start using generative AI for complex use cases. The one that I spoke about earlier is like a point solution. When we start looking at more complex use cases in software development, then it's like using it in different phases of the SDLC by chaining of prompts instead of giving single prompts. You kind of
Mhm,
give a chain of prompts.
mhm.
This can as well be done within the chat interface of the GenAI platform, or for repeated templatized or parameterized usage, we can use the underlying APIs to generate appropriate artifacts for each phase. So that's how you could use it in a slightly more advanced fashion within software development. And to your questions on epics and user stories, this is slightly futuristic. Let me talk about the current phase to start with. I've seen people take pieces of the requirement and kind of feed that into generative AI platform and translate that into like single epics or a high level user story. But in the near future, I'm envisioning this to allow the generative AI platform to consume the business requirements document as is, or even the recordings or transcripts of requirements discussions with business stakeholders and with that consumed and with the right type of prompt chaining and some advanced techniques, we can envision to generate the entire epics or high level user stories or even detailed user stories in the near future, James. That's how I see that going
Hmm.
forward.
It seems like a lot of potential there. Is there one thing you talked about this a little bit? Just to follow up, is there something else the companies need to do to be able to use generative AI and epics and user stories?
Well, it's see, once you have the platform, they need to spend a lot of time in how to chain prompts to be able to consume that
Mhm.
the requirements. So that will take more effort, and I'm sure in the near future, there will be tools and platforms built on top of this to enable ease of use in the near future, James.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, what about the design and user interface aspects? How can generative AI assist with these?
Yeah, I'd kind of broadly classify this into three different areas. One is on the usability discovery and research phase. The second is the wireframe and visual design prototype, and the last being the technical design. So, there are small use cases in each of these that the usability engineers or the UX engineers can use it for. For example, in the UX discovery and research phase, they can use it for usability audits, then potentially identifying feature list generation and comparison between potential market options. Um, ask questions to generative AI in terms of what are the market trends and recommendations on features. Um, identify typical user groups or user personas or user journeys for an e-commerce use case or something along those lines. Also looking at generating insights for, from user feedback and surveys. That's something that, people are, using, you know, generative AI for right now.
Mhm.
Competitive analysis, strengths, weaknesses, and market positioning, generating information about that. Then basic information architecture, which is used by the UX engineers. So generating that basic architecture from a UI standpoint is something. A lot of research report generation, user interview questionnaire preparation, survey questions. So anything that enables you to generate content from a UX standpoint, it can be used from a point solution perspective, James. And that's on the first part. And the second was on the wireframe and visual design prototype. Here, I would say like it'll play a companion role to the visual designer. So it can basically generate various structures and layouts, acting as a second person to brainstorm with and find different types of solutions. And the person can pick and choose what they want to take forward. So basically acting as a companion. Um, basically for more complex problems, it serves as a companion to offer suggestions to the usability engineers. The other use case within that is basically it or generative AI acting as a mood board creator, providing a wide range of visual design styles, basically design variations. And if you want to start off with some suggestions, it'll give you options that from which you can choose, and then basically work on top of that. Basically, a lot of the research work can be done, by the usability engineers through generative AI. And last but not the least is the design portion, the technical design. Here we're talking about, basically two areas within technical design. One is a high-level design and the low-level design. On the high-level design, how I envision is you allow generative AI to generate the application architecture and the deployment architecture based on technical inputs and parameters. So it's not that easy as the way I just described it. I'm sure there will be a lot of tweaks that need to be done, or thought process that needs to go in generating such information. But it's definitely possible and doable. Um, we've seen, POCs happening in this space in the market. And similarly, for the low-level design, where we expect the generative AI to generate class diagrams and sequence diagrams based on technical inputs. So that's how I envision all the three areas to be get covered through generative AI on the user interface as well as on the design, James.
Yeah, those are some pretty major, changes and possibilities. If I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like generative AI is going to really have a major effect on the design and user interface.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just that it's still point solution, so I wouldn't say it'll go end to end, but you can use it for the different use cases that I mentioned. I think the challenge or the way forward is to see how this will seamlessly flow or integrate so that it becomes a seamless experience for the person or the usability engineer or the designer or the architect who uses this interface. So that's obviously, still a long ways to go before we reach that seamless experience. But yes, it has a lot of advantages.
I think the question that many companies are wondering is, what do you see as the future of generative AI and software development? It seems like some very big changes are ahead.
So whatever we discussed so far are basically point solutions, probably a little more complex use cases as far as chaining of prompts and using the API layer to address complex solutions. The way forward or the future of generative AI and software development is basically I'm looking at end-to-end software development lifecycle automation, right? Basically, one input feeding into the other, right from UX to technical design to development to testing to DevOps. So basically, if you would envision the future of generative AI, this is how I would envision it. So the entire SDLC automation happening through generative AI. So one phase feeding into the other, and in each phase having generative AI generate the respective artifacts, and all of this appearing in their native work environment. For example, if somebody's using Azure DevOps, or somebody's using Jira, or somebody's using a specific IDE for writing their code, or using a visual interface designer. All of this natively integrated with some of those existing tools and providing a seamless experience for them to you know feed input and then generate an output then which feeds into the next phase. So end-to-end automation is what we can look forward to in the future, and I'm anticipating both small and large software providers to kind of build specialized or integrated solutions for each of the SDLC phases. So that's how I see that, and it's going to be an interesting phase.
So end-to-end automation, would you care to say a time frame for that? Might that be next year or a couple of years? How long will we wait
Couple,
for that?
couple of years from now, possibly a year or two, is how I anticipate it. We are seeing specialized solutions coming out right now, point-to-point solutions, but yeah, it will take time for end-to-end automation, possibly 2 to 3 years from now.
Hmm.
But it's in the very near future, James.
That's really fascinating. Aju, a lot of good material. Thank you so much for sharing expertise today. I really learned a lot. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me here.